and all. Rap music defined our generation the way the Motown sound had defined our parents' era. We pumped up our music to get in the mood for studying and when we wanted to celebrate. We partied to rap music, we chilled to it, and in our freshman year, Ramik and I stumbled into the creative side of it. It started with a video game competition. After class, Ramik and I often teamed up against two guys from Boston to play video games, mostly Sega Genesis basketball. One day, we turned on some music and started rapping back and forth, the two of us against the two of them. We'd alternately make up rhymes on the spot that chopped up the other players or their hometown. It was all in fun to determine who could come up with the cleverest lyrics. Later on, Ramik and I challenged each other. "Man, I'm better than you," one of us would brag, and the contest began. Sometimes, we just rapped back and forth to each other in the room before going out to a party on Thursday or Friday night. We even recorded a rap video once, when a video company called Funflix came to Seton Hall as part of a campus fun day. The company set up a booth with the latest high-tech equipment and offered students a chance to make a music video for free. We could choose from a list of songs and lip sync to a recording while the cameraman added a creative backdrop, like stars. It was video karaoke. There were a few popular rap songs on the list, so Ramik and I got together with about 5 other friends and made several flicks. One of the guys with us that day was a seasoned rapper known around campus as PS. One night, Ramik and I were talking when one of us suggested that we try to hook up with PS to form a rap group. We approached him about it, and I was surprised that he agreed right away because his skills were so far superior to ours. At first, we considered asking PS to write our lines, but we quickly realized that just wouldn't work. To feel what we were saying, each of us had to write our own lines. I became pretty good at coming up with metaphors, and Ramik developed great producer instincts. He was the one who pulled our individual pieces together into one good rap. We began by rapping over other groups' beats. Then Ramik started creating beats for us using a friend's sampler. Sampling was a popular technique in which musicians lifted a particular sound, say a horn solo or a drum beat, from a recorded song and piece it with other samples or original beats to create background music. We chose the name ART, Another Rough Tribe, for our group in the tradition of the colorful rappers whose sole purpose was to have fun stringing words together, showcasing their talents, and bragging about their exploits, particularly with women. We were big fans of rap pioneers like KRS-One and Rakim, and others like A Tribe Called Quest and leaders of the New School, whose star Busta Rhymes broke away and became a popular solo rapper, sporting flashy, almost clownish costumes. We enjoy listening to all kinds of rap, especially socially conscious rap and even gangster rap, which ignited major controversy with its violent images and themes. We were just having fun in our spare time, unsure of how far we wanted to go with the group, but gradually we got more serious. We asked Sam to be our manager. He is always more interested in working behind the scenes in rap and envisioned himself as more a business mogul, like Russell Simmons, or a producer like Sean Puffy Combs. The more we practiced, the better we got. We wanted to go into the studio to put together some original beats and record some songs, but we had no money. That's when a friend gave one of our tapes to her boyfriend, a Seton Hall basketball star who was being recruited to play in the NBA. An agent he knew owned a big studio in Newark, so he arranged for us to get some free studio time. We went to the studio at least once a week, sometimes more often, depending on our class schedules, and recorded a couple of rap songs. But after a while, the studio wanted to start charging us, so we had to come up with another plan. Sam came to our rescue. Always a penny pincher, Sam had some extra money from his savings over the years and decided to fund us $500. Since all 3 of us were struggling financially, we recognized the huge sacrifice he was making. There was no guarantee that he would get his money back, and unlike me, He couldn't call home for help with his tuition when his money ran short. When I made it to college, my mother took on part-time jobs in addition to her full-time job at the insurance company and sent every dime of the extra money to me to help with tuition and books. She would have killed me if I had used even a penny of it to pursue a career as a rapper. But Sam understood our passion, believed in our talents, and decided to gamble. We found another studio owned by Kool and the Gang, a funk band popular in the 1970s, went in and recorded a couple more songs. We also heard that the Fugees, popular at the time with lead vocalist Lauryn Hill, had a studio in East Orange called the Booger Basement. When we stopped by, we hit it off with the cousin of Wyclef Jean, one of the band's founders. Wyclef's cousin ran the studio and told us he would put together some beats for us. We only had to pay for studio time. We used the Booger Basement to cut 3 more songs, which were even better than our first ones. Now we were ready to copyright our material, but we mistakenly thought we would have enough money to hire a lawyer. Ramit came up with an alternative, the so-called poor man's copyright. We typed the lyrics of our songs, and he sent a copy of them via certified mail to himself. When we had 4 or 5 songs on a demo tape, we decided to put together a package to send to record companies. We didn't have enough money for professional photos, so Ramit asked the guy who took pictures for the student newspaper to take a promotional photo of us. To look like real rappers, we had to appear tough, not like the college boys we had become. We scouted the campus for the perfect photo background. The green grass and stately trees surrounding Seton Hall just wouldn't do. Finally, we found the perfect spot, the upper deck of the student parking lot. The bare look of the concrete at night and the 3 of us in our baggy jeans, bad boy expressions, and hats flipped backward looked just about right. By now, we were in our junior year of college. We assembled 30 packets, each containing a copy of the demo, a promotional photo, and a short bio crafted by our wordsmith, P.S. Then, we used the telephone book and directory assistance to track down the addresses and telephone numbers of about 20 record companies. We were ready for New York. Ramit, P.S., and I skipped our classes and spent a day there, distributing our material. Ramit drove his white Volkswagen Golf, and each of us chipped in for gas and parking. We went from one record company to the next and handed our packet to the highest-ranking person available. A few times we were asked to drop our tape in a box with hundreds of others. One of the record companies on our list was Puffy's Bad Boy Records. Puffy had just started the label with a guy named Harv Pierre. Directory assistants had given us a Harlem address, but when we drove up, we didn't see any office buildings. The address was an apartment complex in the middle of the hood. For a moment, we sat perplexed in the car. What should we do? You don't just go walking up to some apartment in the hood without knowing where you're going. Anything could happen. But we had come this far. We weren't turning around. We found a telephone and called the number on our list. Sure enough, it was Bad Boy Records. We asked the person answering the telephone to confirm the address. He gave us an apartment number. We walked up to the door and rang the buzzer. A voice answered. "Is this Bad Boy Records?" one of us asked. "Yeah, come on up." We felt a bit awkward when we first walked into the apartment because a bunch of guys were just sitting around. We looked around the room. No Puffy. "What do you need?" one of the guys asked. We explained that we were rappers and wanted Puffy to listen to our tape. We figured we had a better chance of getting called back if we could get Puffy to listen to it on the spot. Puffy wasn't there, but we were directed to a bedroom where Harv Pierre, Puffy's vice president, sat on a king-size bed surrounded by at least 300 tapes. 3 different phones sat on the bed next to him, and he had one at each ear. He looked up and saw us. "Can I help y'all? What do you need?" With each of us speaking at different times, we told him we were rappers, that we were in college at Seton Hall, and we really wanted him to listen to our tape. "That's cool, man. That's dope," he responded with a friendliness that immediately put us at ease. He chatted with us for about 5 minutes, but he said he was too busy to listen to the tape right then. He asked us to put it in his pile, and he promised to call us back. We left feeling super hyped. We were sure we would hear from Bad Boy Records. Puffy was just getting started and surely must have been looking for new artists like us. But the telephone call from Bad Boy Records never came. We didn't get even one response from the 20 packets we distributed. We kept trying. We started getting weekend gigs. Our first big performance was at a nightclub about 15 minutes from Seton Hall. It was a hip-hop club that drew a young adult crowd, mostly college students of all races, who came to dance and watch live performances. When we made it to the club the night of our gig, customers were lined up outside the door to get in. As VIPs, we bypassed the crowd. That made us feel important. We did a sound check, gave the disc jockey our instrumental tape, and chilled in the back of the club near the bar until it was time to go on stage. We were the opening act. "What's up, y'all? How y'all doing out there?" Ramik yelled into the microphone as the crowd gathered around the makeshift stage. He introduced himself, then me, then PS by our stage names. "I'm the old veteran, this is Sound Seeker, and this is OZ the Wizard, and we're another rough tribe. All right, DJ, drop that beat." The bass began pounding, and we were into our first song, getting the crowd hyped and dancing to our beat. "Yo, check it out, check it out, check it out." Bodies bounced in rhythm, and dozens of white, yellow, brown, and black hands pumped in the air. They loved us. "Oh man, y'all are dope. When's your CD coming out?" one person after another asked afterward. For the moment, we were hot and loving it. I gave one of our packets to Faith Evans, my friend from elementary school. Through her, Ramik, Sam, and I met some of the guys who would become rap megastars. One of them was Biggie Smalls, also known as the Notorious B.I.G., whom Faith had married in 1994, just days after they met at a photo shoot for Bad Boy Records. For a while, she lived in East Orange and sometimes invited me to her house with them for Sunday dinner. Biggie was a huge dude who must have weighed more than 300 pounds. I'll never forget the image of him seated in the kitchen table with a mound of chicken bones piled high on his plate. He devoured the fried chicken at record speed. Faith was the first female artist signed by Bad Boy Records in 1994. And I went to the recording studio with her every chance I got while she was working on her first album. I'd sit on the floor while Faith recorded in the booth. Puffy, Biggie, and other stars would be in and out all the time. Everybody was down to earth, just regular people back then. Once, Faith invited Sam, Ramik, and me to a photo shoot at Bad Boy Records. The three of us were rolling dice in a small bathroom when Biggie walked in and put up $100. He lost it to Sam in a game called CeeLo. Biggie put up another $100 and lost that too. He kept betting until he owed Sam more than $3,000. Few guys could roll better than Sam. They kept playing until he won all but $400 of it back. Well, $400 was a big deal to a broke college student. Biggie and Puffy raised the profile of rap on the East Coast, especially in New York City. Biggie had been a crack dealer in Brooklyn, and he crafted complex rhymes with lurid lyrics that painted vivid images of the realities of inner city life. The harshness of it, but also the glitzy style that came to be known as ghetto fabulous. Some of his lyrics were disrespectful to women, but mostly Biggie just wanted to make you feel good and tell you how he was loving life. When you listened to him, you were living the glamorous life through him. At the same time, Biggie's West Coast rival, Tupac Shakur, was also selling millions of records with more introspective and poetic lyrics that delved into the life and soul of the gangster. Even if you weren't from the inner city, if you listened to Tupac, you got the feeling that the thugs have more heart than you thought. He reached into himself and tried to interpret where a lot of the negative behavior came from, and he crafted his lyrics in a way that you could really understand. I knew the world they rapped about, and I was a fan of both rappers. But their rivalry ultimately escalated into an East Coast, West Coast feud that some say took the lives of rap's two top stars. Tupac was shot to death on September 7, 1996, in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas. 6 months later, Biggie was gunned down as he left an after-party for the Soul Train Music Awards. The attackers were never identified in either shooting. I was hoping tensions would cool after Tupac's death, so when Biggie died less than a year later in almost the same way, I was shocked. My phone rang off the hook with friends calling to mourn as if a blood brother had just been murdered. Big, tough dudes in my old neighborhood were walking around dazed. I was sure the anti-rap forces would find a way to put more pressure on the rap industry and just shut it down. Critics were already blaming rap for glorifying and perpetuating the violence in communities like the ones where Sam Ramik and I grew up. By the time Biggie was killed, Ramik and I had already made a major decision about our career as rappers. When we gave the tape to Faith in 1994, our junior year in college, she passed it on to her lawyer, who sent it to Dennis Scott, an NBA player who was with the Orlando Magic. He owned a company called 3D Entertainment, which managed a couple of rap groups. Apparently, he liked one of our songs and he sent us a letter saying he wanted to hear more. The problem was, we were flat broke. We didn't have the resources to go back into the studio and record. Ramik was so excited about our chances of succeeding as rappers that he wanted to put everything into making this dream happen. He was even willing to skip medical school. He figured the three of us would still be together, just pursuing a different dream. But the life of a rapper was his dream, not ours. He loved the stage, the spotlight, and the cheers from the crowd. It was part of his fantasy of becoming an actor. To him, being a rapper was the next best thing. We had good connections, and he figured we could count on them for help. And if things didn't work out, we could always return to school. I wasn't feeling the same way. Graduation from college was less than a year away, and we had to start applying to dental and medical schools. We had to make a crucial decision. One night, the subject came up during conversation. "Yo, man, we can really do this," Ramik began. "Let's just do it. Let's go and be rappers." It was time for me to be honest. My enthusiasm was waning. I knew that if I gave my books enough time, I was guaranteed to become a dentist. But I can go into the studio a million times, and no matter how good the songs were, I wasn't guaranteed to sell those records. With rap, it really came down to luck. Maybe we would be some of the lucky ones, but I wasn't willing to take that risk. "Look how many broke rappers are out there, man," I said to Ramik. "One day they're big and hot with the biggest studio, and the next day they're not. Man, you're on your way to medical school. You want to drop medical school for this? I'm on my way to dental school. I'm not dropping dental school for this. You're crazy." "Come on, man, you're stupid, man. Let's just try. Let's just see what happens," Ramik shot back. I didn't budge. "Nah, man, I'm not even gonna see. At some point, we still have to make a decision, and I've already made mine." Ramik got quiet. I had just spewed acid on his fantasy, and it was shriveling up before his eyes. He didn't want to try it alone, and P.S., our other partner, had already drifted away. P.S. was a brilliant student, as talented in math as he was in rap, but he didn't try hard at either one and ended up dropping out of Seton Hall. After a few minutes of silence, Ramik looked at me. I wasn't sure what he would say. "You know what, man?" he said softly. "You're right." That was it. Our career as rappers came to an abrupt halt. Our pact was still solid. Once again, we were on our way to becoming doctors. Just days after graduating from Seton Hall, I packed all of my belongings and moved home to Newark to begin dental school. My mom's apartment in Hyde Park Gardens was practically within walking distance from the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey downtown. It didn't make much sense to spend money renting an apartment elsewhere when just paying tuition was a struggle. I moved back into my old room. My mother and I have always been close, so I didn't feel bad asking her if I could move back home. She saw it as just another way to help me. She didn't hassle me too much the times I stayed out partying, and everything worked out well. It was cheaper than I would find anywhere else. But when Mom tried to turn over her lease to me, the board of directors, all of whom were tenants, resisted. Most of the tenants were older residents who brought stability and security to the complex, and board members didn't want to upset that. But, of course, they didn't tell me that directly. They tried to use my status as a full-time student against me. They said they were concerned that I didn't have a steady income. I explained that my grants and loans would cover the rent. The president of the board, Blondie Watson, who had given me my first job as a yard boy at the complex, spoke up for me. Somehow, she persuaded the other board members to give me a chance. I got to keep the apartment. No one was happier for my mom than I that she had finally realized her dream of buying a home. She'd been working so hard to help put me through college and dental school that at times I felt guilty. I worried that I was killing her. College and medical school weren't the free ride that Sam, Ramik, and I had expected. The fund that was supposed to cover our tuition had been mismanaged, and we never got the full tuition scholarship we had been promised. Though the university administrators put together packages of grants, loans, and scholarships to cover the bulk of our expenses, we still had to come up with thousands of dollars. Practically every semester, all three of us worried whether we were going to get kicked out of college over an unpaid tuition bill. My mom got a part-time job. She began her days at 7 a.m. at Chubb Insurance, worked until 4 p.m., and arrived an hour later at Bell Atlantic Mobile, where she worked part-time in the customer service department for another 4 hours. Many nights I worried about her driving home alone on deserted highways through the pitch-black swamp after working 14-hour days. Unpaid tuition fees kept accruing each year, and I graduated from Seton Hall with a balance of more than $6,000. That would cause problems for me during my residency when the university would go to court, obtain an order, and levy my checking account for half the balance at a time when I really couldn't spare it. Because of the unpaid balance, the university also held on to my degree. When I found myself in a financial jam, I usually waited until the last minute to call her. I would try everything else that I could think of before turning to her because I knew she would dip into her retirement savings for me. That is exactly what happened at the end of my senior year of dental school when it was time to take my state licensing exam. The school passed out literature explaining the logistical details of the exam, but I was so busy preparing for graduation that I forgot to read it until a few days before the test. When my eyes fell on the line about fees of nearly $1,000, I panicked. There was no way I would be able to come up with that amount of money in such a short time. I was too scared to call my mother that night. I lay awake practically all night wondering how I could get the money on my own. 2 days before the money was due, I was near tears when I called my mother and asked for help. She borrowed the money from her 401k, the fund she had established to secure her future. Other times, she called on her 8 brothers and sisters who chipped in to help. My mother's friend Deborah and her husband James, a lawyer, also gave me a few $100s a couple of times a year to help buy my books. Deborah had helped put James through law school, so they understood my struggle. About 4 months after my mother moved to her new house in Piscataway, I had to call on her for help. Maintaining our old apartment on my own without a job proved to be more difficult than I had anticipated. She told me that I can move in with her and my stepdad in their new home. I packed all of my things, moved to Piscataway, and commuted to school in bumper-to-bumper traffic that stretched a drive that usually took just 45 minutes into an hour and a half. I couldn't stand it. After just 4 days, I packed up again and headed back to my apartment in Newark with a new determination to do a better job of budgeting. Fortunately, I had not notified the board or called the utility company about my move, so everything was just as I had left it. Before I even unpacked, Lonnie Watson called and asked if I wouldn't mind relocating to a 1-bedroom apartment so that a new family moving into the complex could have the 2-bedroom unit. I agreed and moved 2 doors down. I had no idea that living in the old neighborhood again would be such a distraction. There had been something invigorating and quietly inspiring about the environment at Seton Hall, where I was surrounded daily by thousands of other young men and women all hustling to achieve their dreams. Everywhere you looked, students were together in study groups or curled alone on lounge chairs or under trees with their books. If there was an opposite of that, my neighborhood was it. Sometimes it felt surreal, walking past the drunks, dealers, and addicts on my way home from dental school with a pile of books. I'd wave and greet them with a, "Hey, how y'all doing?" and head on up to my apartment. When I tried to study in my room, I'd hear pit bull fights outside my window or people yelling back and forth across the street. This went on every day, all day. When I went out, I had to watch my back. The security I felt at Seton Hall had desensitized me to my old environment, causing me to relax too much during my 4 years in college. One time, the temporary lapse of street smarts could have cost me my life. One afternoon, during my sophomore year at Seton Hall, I drove back to Newark to visit a friend. As I got out of my car, a guy walked up and offered to sell me some brand new speakers really cheap. I had just bought my car, and I was like, man, I could use a new sound system. He asked me to drive him to pick up the speakers. I drove a few blocks and he showed me where to stop. He got out of the car and began walking toward a more secluded area. Like a fool, I followed him. All of a sudden, he turned around quickly and pulled out a gun. "You know what it is," he said. I gave him $45. He ran away. I was mad at myself for ignoring the rules of the streets that had kept me alive. But I was madder at the hustler who had just run away with my $45. I hopped in my car and drove to my cousin Reggie's house not too far away. He was well respected in the streets, and he and my brother were pretty tight. I told Reggie what happened. He was angry. I didn't know it then, but he had told my brother that he would never let anybody mess with me. "George don't ever mess with nobody," he had told my brother. He walked into his bedroom, opened the closet, and put something into his jacket. I couldn't see what it was. "Let's go," he said. We got in my car and retraced my steps. "You see him?" my cousin kept asking me, looking for the guy who had just robbed me. "You see him?" We drove around for 15 minutes, and I didn't see the guy. But I made a right turn, and there he was. We locked eyes for a second. "You see him?" my cousin asked again. "No, man," I said. "Let's go home." Many of the friends who had been like little brothers to me had never even left the neighborhood. They were doing nothing with their lives, or rather, nothing they felt free to talk about. But I was still cool with them. They rang my bell at all times of the day and night. I kept an open door policy because I preferred that they drank a few beers and played video games inside my apartment than that they found trouble in the streets. Sometimes I drank a beer or two with them. I had started drinking socially in college. Many of my friends were as deep into the streets as I was into school, but I didn't judge them. When we saw each other, the 10-year-olds we once were came out. They didn't see me as a potential victim of theirs or as a person studying to become a doctor. And I didn't see them as a potential threat. We saw each other as the kids who used to play football together in the parking lot, so they didn't mind leaving their guns behind before walking into my place. My friends respected me enough not to do certain things in my apartment or in my presence. One time, I overheard one of the guys say to another, "Make sure you don't tell George." I confronted him. "Man, you need to leave those streets alone," I said. "If you're even thinking about doing something crazy, you're not plotting it in here." My apartment was often so full of noisy neighborhood guys that it felt like a boys' club. I learned to tune them out while I was in my bedroom studying. They knew that when I closed my bedroom door, I was studying for a test, and they respected that. They at least kept the noise down to a level that I could block out. It was sort of like living next to a train station. After a while, the noise just blends into the background and you learn to function in spite of it. Unfortunately, my neighbors didn't quite see things that way. I had to appear before the board at least 3 times to respond to neighbors' complaints about too much noise and traffic in my apartment. I always felt bad about that because I knew that Miss Watson had vouched for me. One time, her daughter confronted me. "My mom stuck her neck out for you," she said angrily before giving me a verbal tongue lashing, no doubt meant to make me feel worse. I didn't like her coming up to me like that, but she was right. What could I say? I stood there and took it in stride. She couldn't have known how torn I felt between protecting her mother's image and providing a haven for my friends. I could tell that the whole neighborhood was proud of me. On my way to and from school, men and women in the community stopped to congratulate me or ask if I needed anything. Sometimes they even knocked on my door to check on me. These were people who had little or nothing themselves, but they were willing to share what they had to help me. Their generosity always reminded me that I was carrying the hopes of a bunch of people when I walked onto that university campus. Sometimes, though, straddling 2 distant worlds messed with my head. It felt weird spending the day with my dental school peers, whose biggest worry was whether they would pass the test, and then returning home to such despair. I was in the middle, and that was a lonely spot. The only people I could relate to during those times were Ramik and Sam. I missed those guys so much. The 3 of us had moved into an apartment near campus together with another guy the summer after our sophomore year at Seton Hall. At one point, Sam, Ramik, and I began to put our money together to buy each other an inexpensive but thoughtful birthday gift. Ramik had a busted-up notepad that he used as a phone book, and Sam and I used to rag on him about it. So when his birthday rolled around, Sam and I got him a really nice leather one. Ramik loved that gift. Ramik and I gave Sam a digital clock because he had an annoying bright orange wind-up clock that used to crack us up whenever it went off. I wanted to take a hammer to that old one when we gave him his birthday gift, but he wouldn't allow it. For my birthday, Ramik and Sam took me to Atlantic City and gave me money to gamble with. It was sort of a joke because they always said I had beginner's luck. I always seemed to win when I tried a new game for the first time. Sure enough, I won around 20 times that night without losing a cent. The piece of my winnings that I broke off for each of them was more than they had given me in the first place. We all went home a little richer in money and friendship that night. When Sam and Ramik moved to New Brunswick to finish their senior year at Rutgers and begin medical school early, I felt lost. We had been inseparable for all 4 years of college. Walking to class alone felt weird, but their leaving lit a fire in me. I had made average grades in college, but I may have been too comfortable because I knew I could count on Ramik and Sam to help me study. Sam's tireless work ethic rubbed off on me. That wasn't one of my natural traits, so I often wouldn't put the hours and work into studying that he did. But I began to push myself harder because he was my boy. Ramik helped me to develop a more skeptical, analytical side. He taught me to think before accepting what someone says at face value. I tended to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Ramik was just the opposite. As a result of our friendship, I think I landed somewhere in the middle. Now I would be on my own the rest of the way, and I had to kick my performance up a notch to hold up my end of our deal. Ramik, Sam, and I always called or visited one another when one of us needed encouragement. In their senior year of college and first year of medical school when they lived in New Brunswick, the drive was about 30 minutes each way. When they moved to South Jersey in the third year to begin clinical rotations, the drive was at least an hour. I opened up to them about how odd I felt traveling daily between my two worlds. At times, those worlds seemed at war, like on the nights I tried to study while sirens blared and yapping pit bulls clawed and mauled each other outside my window. "Man, I know what you mean," one of them would say. That meant a lot. Talking to them always helped me put those feelings to bed and focus again on school. School had to be all that mattered if we were to finish. I was always pretty good at figuring out what to study. The volume of information thrown at you in dental school can be overwhelming, but I was able to home in pretty quickly on what was significant. I could take 80 pages of notes from a lecture and figure out what the professor was going to focus on for a test. I usually picked up clues from the inflection in his voice or the amount of time spent on a subject during a lecture. I go over all of my notes a few times but concentrate mostly on the notes I had highlighted. Sometimes that approach backfired, and I got a grade less than I expected, but 80% of the time I got that B+. When it was time to study for the first state board exam at the end of my second year, I always wore cargo pants with lots of pockets. I transferred my notes to index cards and stuffed the cards in all of my pockets. Whenever I had a moment of downtime, whether I was at a party or riding in a car with a friend, I pulled out my cards to study. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on school, home competed for my attention. Soon after I moved back to Newark, I heard that my childhood friend, Naeem, was sleeping on another friend's couch every night. I went over to see him and invited him to stay with me until he could get himself together. At the time, I was still living in a 2-bedroom apartment. Naeem and I had first met as kids living in the Stella Wright housing projects. He was 3 years younger, but he and I were in the same gifted and talented program at Louise A. Spencer Elementary School. His situation at home wasn't as stable as mine, though, and he later started selling drugs to take care of himself and his younger brother. Then he dropped out of high school. I was away at college when he, at the age of 16, got busted for selling drugs. He didn't serve any jail time, but he was sentenced to home detention and wore an ankle monitor for a few months. The arrest was enough to turn him away from his former trade, but he seemed unable to snap the pieces of his life into place afterward. I respected him because he was determined not to go back to selling drugs, even if it meant being unsure every night where he would lay his head. I wanted to help him. "Look, man, I've got an extra bedroom," I told him. "You can stay there. Don't worry about anything. I've got the same bills whether you're in my apartment or not." When I moved to the 1-bedroom apartment, Naeem slept on my sofa. My only rule was that he had to be out looking for a job, going to school, or doing something productive every day. He couldn't just lie around my apartment doing nothing. I always pushed him. I bought him books to study for his high school equivalency diploma and took him to Essex County College to find out the dates when the test would be given. But it was extremely difficult to motivate him. He was completely drained of hope. About 2.5 years after Naeem moved in, he confided in me that he was worried about his 17-year-old brother, Abdul, who lived in Irvington with an aunt. Abdul, a junior in high school, had begun skipping classes and hanging with the wrong crowd. I was worried that Abdul would repeat his brother's mistake, so I invited him to move in with us. I thought I might be able to talk some sense into him. Every day, I talked to him and pushed him to go to school. Man, you see how hard a time Naeem is having? I told him. As long as you have a plan, I'll help you. Abdul stayed with me about 6 months, and Naeem stayed more than 3 years. But in my last year of dental school, just months before graduating, my brother Garland moved back to Newark from Atlanta, where he had spent the past 8 years. He needed a place to stay and didn't want to move to the suburbs with our parents. He moved in with me too. That meant 4 guys were now sharing a 1-bedroom apartment. None of the others was working, so I was carrying everybody's weight. My big brother is a good guy, but he and I are total opposites. As a kid, Garland hated school and brought home F's all of the time. When he was in high school, he once brought home a report card showing a vast improvement in his grades. He had 4 B's, 3 C's, and a D. Our mom, who rarely gets excited about anything, was thrilled. She had this look of relief on her face that said she was finally getting through to him. But when she held the report card up to the light, she realized it was a big hoax. All of the grades had been changed with a typewriter. Garland had failed practically every class. I never forgot the disappointment on my mom's face. I never wanted to make her feel that way. The month after my brother moved in, my telephone bill arrived with more than $300 in long-distance charges, and nobody owned up to them. Though I had my suspicions, I couldn't prove who had done it. I knew then that it was time to clean house. I asked all 3 of them to leave. I had helped them as much as I could. Graduation from dental school was months away, and I needed to focus on my future. Naeem eventually got a job, bought himself a car, and began studying again for his high school equivalency diploma. Sometimes we went together to the public library to study. But despite my best efforts, Abdul still dropped out of high school. That was a huge disappointment. Having grown up without a father for much of my life, I knew the importance of male role models. I had been fortunate to know good men, including my friends who stood in the gap and taught me life lessons, large and small. It was Ramik, for example, who helped me choose my first car and taught me how to drive it. I was a sophomore at Seton Hall and needed a car to get back and forth to work and school. My mom gave me about $3,000 to buy a used car, and I wanted to get a good deal. Ramik had just bought his second car, the white Volkswagen Golf, so he volunteered to walk me through the process. He took me to a small dealership and introduced me to the salesman who had sold him his car. We spent a couple of hours checking out the cars on the lot before settling on a gray, 2-door 1986 Volkswagen Jetta. It didn't have power steering or air conditioning, and only the front windows rolled up and down. But it had a great engine and was within my price range. There was one major drawback. It had a standard transmission, and I didn't know how to drive a stick shift. Ramik assured me that he could teach me. For 2 days, my car sat idle in the parking lot at Seton Hall. I grew frustrated. One morning about 1 a.m., I walked across the hall and banged on Ramik's door. He had been out partying and was in no condition to drive. "Rob, man, I know you've been out and everything, but I need to learn how to drive my car right now," I said. I knew the basics. I just needed some practice. Without saying a word, Ramik got up and followed me to the parking lot. I got behind the wheel and slipped the car into gear, but I released the clutch too quickly and it stalled. After a few tries, I bucked out of the parking lot and down the main street leading off campus. I picked up speed, but when I tried to change gears, the car again jerked to a stop in the middle of the street. A car traveling behind me slammed on its brakes and skidded into the back of my car. Fortunately, the Jetta was so sturdy that it didn't even get a scratch, so I let the driver go without exchanging telephone numbers. When I hopped back into the driver's seat, Ramik burst out laughing. We laughed all the way back to Seton Hall. Someone always seemed to be there when I needed fatherly advice or instructions. I was in the second year of dental school and the first day of class with a conservative professor named Dr. Nicholas. I had heard rumors that he made all of the guys wear ties to class. I had managed to complete the first year of dental school without even wearing dress shoes, let alone a tie. When Dr. Nicholas made the announcement, I started to sweat. No one had ever taught me how to knot a tie. Throughout high school, I had avoided wearing one or someone had tied it for me on the spot. The next morning, I dug through the drawers in my apartment until I found an old multicolored silk tie. I clasped it tightly and dashed to class. I got there a few minutes early and stood at the door. My eyes worked the room and landed on Jason Carnes, a classmate with a kind face and a perfectly knotted tie. I walked up to him. "Look, I need this tie tied," I said. Jason must have seen the embarrassment in my eyes. He could have tied it for me right then and there, as I expected him to do. Without a word, he motioned for me to follow him down the hall to the bathroom. He took my tie and showed me step by step how to knot it. He took it apart and retied it slowly 2 or 3 times. Then I took it apart and practiced 2 or 3 more times. I tied it one last time, and from that moment on, the knot I wore was my own.
Chapter 15. Graduation. George.
For a while, it seemed that both Sam and I would land in Maryland for our residencies. I was considering joining the U.S. Air Force as a dentist, and I expected to be stationed at Andrews Air Force Base, about an hour down the road from Baltimore. The Air Force was offering a $30,000 one-time signing bonus, not including salary and benefits, to entice recruits to its medical corps. The money caught my attention. An Air Force van picked up several classmates and me and drove us to Maryland to tour Andrews in our senior year of dental school. We walked through Air Force 2, the Vice President's plane, and saw Air Force 1, the President's plane, up close. But I changed my mind about joining the military. I had just spent a grueling 8 years in college and dental school, and I realized that I didn't want to face the rigors of boot camp or the everyday restrictions of military life. I could have graduated from dental school and gone to work right away as a dentist. A dentist isn't required to do a residency, but I figured a residency would give me the practical experience I needed and make me more competitive. I learned that there was an opening in dentistry for a general practice resident at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey in Newark, the same place that had first inspired my dream to become a dentist. I talked to Zia Shea, Associate Dean of the dental school, and expressed an interest. I interviewed and was offered the position. About the same time, Ramik and Sam told me they had accepted their residencies in the Newark area. Sam at Beth Israel Medical Center and Ramik at Robert Wood Johnson. We would end up at home together. It had never occurred to me that our graduation ceremonies would be at the same time. One day, near the end of my last semester in dental school, I asked them the dates and places of their graduations. When they told me that their ceremonies were set for May 26th at the PNC Bank Art Center in Homedale, I realized that there would be one ceremony for the entire University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey system. We would graduate together. Ramik and I decided to invite some of our favorite teachers and counselors from University High School to our graduation. One of the staff members we invited was Dr. Valerie Noble, a guidance counselor who had encouraged us in high school. We often went to our guidance counselors when we needed to talk about a personal problem or had career questions, and they were always helpful. Dr. Noble was extremely proud that Ramik, Sam, and I had remained friends and were now about to graduate from medical school. Knowing our backgrounds, she said she couldn't stop thinking about what an extraordinary accomplishment we had achieved. In the days before graduation, she told a reporter she knew about us. When Dr. Noble called and told us that the local paper was interested in writing a story about us, I was more puzzled than excited. I didn't understand what the big deal was. Hundreds of students were graduating from medical school that day, but we agreed to be interviewed. We met with a reporter before graduation. It was a beautiful sunny morning, and we arrived in our black caps and gowns and colorful hoods. My mother, my father, my grandmother, and most of my aunts and uncles, as well as my childhood friends, Naeem and Abdul, Shahid Jackson and his father and brother, were all there. When I saw my Aunt Lestine Graves, I was reminded how much her achievements had inspired me. Aunt Lestine had been in her early 40s when she returned to college in Maryland about the same time I entered Seton Hall. Then, a mother of 2 teenagers, she consistently ranked at the top of her class. Many times when I struggled with a class, I thought about how tough it must have been for her to juggle school and family. Yet she consistently outperformed her younger peers, most of whom had the luxury of concentrating solely on school. You know what? I can do it too, I said to myself. The graduates sat in large groups divided by schools. Because we were seated in alphabetical order, I sat next to the other guys whose names began with J. Guys I had sat next to for 4 years during my major exams and classes that grouped us that way. We talked and goofed off for most of the ceremony. Finally, it was time to receive our degrees. The Master of Ceremonies first called the Robert Wood Johnson School of Medicine, and the graduates all stood and moved toward the stage. One by one, their names were called. Then, Dr. Sampson Davis. As I watched Sam walk across the stage, I sat still and quiet. Pride swirled through my body. I was thinking, man, we really did this. I thought of all we had been through together, from boys comparing sneakers on the schoolyard in junior high to men walking across the stage to become doctors. We had leapt into the unknown together and locked hands and pulled each other up, over, and through the rough spots. I remembered how much I had hurt for him when he had failed the state board exam for the first time, how I had driven to Camden 1.5 hours each way nearly every weekend after that to be there for him. I tried to get him to play basketball and just have some fun to get his mind off the results of that test. It was all I could do to show him that I cared and that he wasn't alone. This was the 4th time Sam and I had graduated together. Junior high, high school, college, and now medical and dental school. Just before graduation, Ramik had placed so much faith in me that he became one of my first patients. He needed some dental work done, and instead of going to an established professional, he visited the clinic at the dental school about 5 different times so that I could feel a few of his teeth. I even performed periodontal surgery on him. The credits I earned working on my boy helped me to graduate. Sam, Ramik, and I had become brothers, accepting each other for who we were. Our relationship extended to our families. During medical school, Ramik lived with my aunt in Maryland rent-free so he could do a rotation at Howard University. I didn't really feel proud of myself until I saw Sam and Ramik walk across the platform. I thought of all I had learned from them. Sam, the workhorse, the most doggedly determined person I'd ever met, who held so much inside, and Ramik, the skeptic and activist, who was outraged by injustice and always believed there was something he could do to make things right. I like to think I brought foresight to our trio. I've always been able to think clearly and see through to the end of a situation before getting entangled in it. That saved our behinds 1,000,000 times. When Ramik, Sam, and I each crossed the stage to get our diplomas, our families and friends roared. Each of us had an entourage of at least 20 people sitting in every corner of the amphitheater. Afterward, classmates jokingly asked if we had hired cheering squads. After graduation, Sam, Ramik, and I decided not to go out together. We had planned our first real vacation together, and we were leaving for Cancun the next morning. It was our treat for all of the spring breaks and summer vacations we had missed because we'd been studying or working, and for all of the trips our families couldn't afford to take while we were kids growing up in Newark. I did, however, go to visit my father, who had arrived in town 2 days before my graduation. I had been so busy that I hadn't had time to see him. A couple of my friends went with me to his hotel room. All of us had a few drinks together and caught up. I shared with him what was going on in my life, and he talked a bit about his. Nothing really deep. This was the way things were between my father and me. I had long ago accepted that. Before I left, he told me he was proud of me. An hour had passed. It was time for me to get home. Early the next morning, I drove around the corner to get a newspaper from one of the street salesmen. I knew the story on us was scheduled to appear, but I didn't know on what page. I stuck my hand out of the car window and motioned for the newspaper salesman. He turned to walk toward me, and I could see the front page atop the stack of papers in the plastic vest he was wearing. As he got closer, the photo of 3 boys drew more sharply into focus. They were grade school pictures of Ramik, Sam, and me. We were on the front page. I was blown away. Most of the time when I saw young black men on the front page of a newspaper, they had either committed a big crime or they were dead. Not this day, though. Our childhood photos were atop a larger photo of us congratulating each other after graduation. The story underneath told all of Newark about our pact. I had no idea then that the headline would be prophetic. It read simply, "Start of something big."
Chapter 8.
It really makes us feel good when we finish a speech at a school, church, or community center, and kids come up to us in their cliques and say they're going to form their own pact. When the three of us promised in high school to see each other through to become doctors, we had no idea how we'd get through. We honestly didn't even give it much thought. But we realized since then that each of us was successful individually in large part because of our pact. The pact gave us the motivation to keep pushing when it would have been easier to just give up. So we've come up with a few pieces of advice to help others unite with friends to reach short-term or long-term goals. We believe these steps can be useful to the group no matter what the goal is. First, join trustworthy friends who have the same goal. George was the one who put our pact together. Though two of us, Ramik and Sam, initially had different ideas about what we wanted to do after high school, we came around to George's way of thinking before making our promise to one another. Next, find strength in your differences. Friends don't have to be alike to be part of a pact. The three of us all have distinct personalities that we bring to the mix, and that just makes our bond all the more interesting and strong. We draw from one another's strengths, but to be able to keep our promise to one another, we first had to want the same thing. The few times when our promise threatened to break apart was when one of us began to want something different from what the other two wanted. We also had to trust each other completely. We had to believe that we had one another's back, or crazy suspicions of each other's motives might have driven us apart. Next, believe in yourself and your friends. After we graduated from high school, Ramik's younger sister, Daima, ended up with the same biology teacher that he'd had, the one he didn't like. When Daima told the teacher that she was Ramik's sister, the teacher asked whether he had become a bum. No, Daima said proudly. He's a doctor. That teacher may not have believed that Ramik was ever going to do anything positive with his life. But all three of us knew he was smart and would find a way to make a positive difference in the world. All three of us had and still have that kind of faith in each other. It just doesn't make much sense to hook up with somebody you can't believe in. Next, compete in a healthy way. This is a biggie because healthy competition pushed each of us to be at the top of our game all the time. Each of us wanted to perform as well as the other two. But understand that healthy competition is just that, healthy, which means there's no room for jealousy. Jealousy would have brought too much negative energy to our group. It would have made us question the trust that is so integral to our friendship and to the very nature of a pact. If any of us ever felt even a bit envious of the others, it never surfaced in a way that was obvious to us. We celebrated one another's successes, and each one of us felt the same hurt when one of our boys failed at something. Next, communicate openly, honestly, and often. This kept us sane. We hung out together and talked every day about what we were going through. We compared notes and gave each other advice and suggestions. Ramik and Sam were roommates for all 8 years, and to be successful at it, they learned to talk out their differences better than many married couples. There were times, though, when we kept things from each other. Times when sharing our feelings was difficult. We blamed that on just being guys. In our case, the stereotype, guys don't share their feelings with each other, was definitely true. If we have any regrets, that's probably chief among them. Our inability to communicate when Sam felt like he was dying inside forced him to look outside the group for support. There was nothing wrong with that, except we risked isolating him and leaving him feeling resentful. Fortunately for us, things didn't turn out that way. And finally, lean on your friends and allow them to lean on you. This is just an extension of the friendship bond, but it becomes particularly important when you're working together to reach a goal, because the pact essentially ties your fates together. One of the main benefits of forming a pact with friends is that you have an automatic network of support. You shouldn't have to seek elsewhere to find it. The three of us didn't truly realize how much we had accomplished together until we started working on this book. Of course, we understood the enormity of our achievements. We can hardly believe them ourselves. But working together on this project, going over our years together, we feel great pride. And we also feel awe. Awe in the power of friendship, a power greater than any one of us could have individually. After writing this book, we see more clearly than ever that we needed each other to achieve our dreams. Even as we write, we are just weeks away from completing our residencies. Sam will be starting as an emergency room attending physician, a head doctor at Beth Israel in Newark. George will be an administrator and assistant professor at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey in Newark. and he is working on his master's in public health. Ramik will be starting as an assistant professor and director of the outpatient clinic at St. Peter's University Hospital in New Brunswick, just a few miles away. Our pact has extended beyond anything we could have ever imagined in high school. Through our nonprofit organization, the Three Doctors Foundation, we hope to inspire and create opportunities for inner city communities by providing education, mentoring, and health awareness. The foundation is a vehicle through which we do our community work. We do public speaking engagements together. We go to schools, colleges, churches, and even corporations to share our story. We've come a long way from the streets of Newark in some ways, but not that far at all in others. Our hearts are still with the families and friends who didn't have the opportunities, the friendships, or maybe even the crazy dreams that were somehow given to us. Those who are still struggling every day just to survive. They are the reason we wrote this book. Dr. Samson Davis, Dr. George Jenkins, and Dr. Ramik Hunt.